Welcome to Inside Plug, the podcast where independent creators and entrepreneurs connect and inspire. I'm your host, Devon Jones. Today on our show, we have actor Christopher Morley. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Devin. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you here. So you're one of our many actors. Actors is like a big part of filmmaking because without an actor that's going to portray that character to get the story moving, it's kind of hard to have your film do great in the box office. But before we jump into the projects that you worked on as an actor, let's talk about Christopher himself. When did you discover acting, and when did you decide that that's a career I want to pursue?
So I started acting when I was in my sort of early teens, I guess. And I started off doing various plays and joined a theatre group where I would do musicals. So we'd do one musical a year and then we'd do a pantomime at Christmas. So like a comedy one. Um, and then I sort of moved on to another company and started doing sort of more straight acting, so Shakespeare and things like that. Um, I then took an unusual turn for a lot of actors. I basically went off and did something completely different. I caught an interest in archaeology, basically, so digging, and I made a career out of it. And I sort of gradually rose up the ranks to the point where I do the reporting now. I also had kids, and so just raised a family. And more recently, when I've got a bit more time, because my boys are grown up a little bit now, I've been able to get back into acting. So about sort of 3 years ago-ish, I got back into doing acting. And it's primarily screen acting that I do now. So short films, feature films, things of that nature. So yeah, it's been a bit of an unusual, unorthodox sort of career progression for me. But yeah, an interesting ride.
Awesome, awesome. I love that. So before we jump into a little bit more about the acting, out of curiosity, so you say you had that interesting turn. You became a archaeologist.
Hmm.
Um, any interesting things that you discovered, came across that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done all sorts of things over the years, but I guess some of the most interesting things are you'll find sort of prehistoric burials. So you'll find, sort of these are 4, 5, 6,000 year old burials with grave goods in there. So people will be buried with like, a bronze dagger or, an iron knife and all that sort of stuff. Um, you find sort of the bases of buildings and like Roman sort of bits of mosaic and things of that nature as well. It's, there's all sorts of things. It's anything you find is incredible because you're the first person to see it in thousands of years. So yeah, it's a really rewarding career. I've been lucky.
Awesome. All right. So then now you're you said after your kids got a little bit older, you started to jump back into acting and now you're doing screen acting. Could you share how was that experience getting back into it after being out for a while? And how was that first project?
Yeah, so it was very interesting. I mean, when I was younger and I was acting, it was primarily stage. So I did a lot of stage, obviously, and the musical side of it as well. But coming back into it, because I'm doing other things, I need to find projects that will fit around like my other activities, basically. So I've found that screen acting is more manageable for me. You've got a sort of set period of time when you're going to actually be shooting the film. You're not having to sort of do a run of plays over the course of months or anything like that. It's short, sharp, phases. Um, and it was quite an interesting and I guess it was the right decision for me to sort of make that move. It's really suited me well. Um, there's a big difference between acting for stage and acting for screen that I found as well. It's obviously, there's a lot more subtlety involved with acting for screen. So, whereas on stage you may have sort of very loud gestures and you might sort of indicate things a bit more, like on screen, it's very much more minimalist, unless there's a reason not to be, and that's where the drama comes out. So, it's been a very interesting learning experience actually for me over the last few years. Um, and you mentioned about the first project as well. So I'm trying to think. I think the first thing that I did was a short film, basically where I played. It's like a mob boss, and he had decided that like the person that was going out with his daughter was actually a rat. So it's like all Brooklyn based, and he basically shook him down, like, and they ended up having a standoff with pistols to their head, and it was great. I absolutely loved it, and yeah, I've since then I've done dozens of different short films, feature films, series, various things. So yeah.
That's awesome. So I got a quick question before we jump into the other projects. So this one, you're playing a mob boss. In the first one, how did you prepare for that? How did you...
Yeah, for the first one. So, I mean, that's something that I, some of my favorite characters, if you think of the likes of De Niro and Ray Liotta and various other um, movie actors, a lot of them play on a regular basis mob bosses, gangsters, all the rest of it. So it's always been like a sort of character of interest to me. So I was quite familiar with the sort of gestures, the way that they intonate, the sense of threat that they portray, in very few movements, really, just by their sheer presence. So I had that kind of experience of them already. And then it was a case of watching various other performances and sort of building my own backstory and character.
Awesome. And what was the name of that project?
It was called Rat Trap.
Rat Trap. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So now let's talk about this project that we have here. When the Snow Falls. You played the character called Walter. It's a short film. How did you get a part of that project, and how was the experience playing that character?
So this was a funny story actually, Devin. I applied for a different production with the same director and producer, and it fell through basically, like the whole production. But in the background, they'd been sort of together collaboratively writing this other one, When the Snow Falls. And so they came to me, we were in discussions at the time, and they said, look, this one isn't going to work. Are you interested in this film? So I had a look at the script, I had a look at the character, had a think about it, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. Um, it's basically about a sort of middle-aged man. He's a husband, but he's also got a dark secret, which is that he's an addict. So he's addicted to cocaine, effectively, and he's managed to sort of get over it. He's managed to defeat it and go into remission to a certain extent, and then things start to happen, and he falls back into his old habit. And the story basically charts the way that it affects his life, and he descends into this spiral of like despair ultimately. And yeah, it was a very impactful film, and the director shot it in a kind of a film noir style. So it's black and white. There's minimal dialogue. There is some, but it's fairly minimal. Lots of zooming in, lots of zooming out. Lots of space. By comparison to a small proportion of actor on screen. The usual stuff. And it was really, really well shot. I mean, the director's one of the best I've ever worked with. He just could see what we needed to do. He'd walk into the room and say, that doesn't need to be there. That needs to be there. You go there. He just could see it. Really, really brilliant.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So then now let's jump into this next one, The Shepherd's Tale. How was the experience with that project?
Yeah, so that was another interesting one. So it was a bunch of five quite young guys that had basically written this script, and it was about a farmer who the film starts off with him burying his dog, basically. So he's lost his dog, and then suddenly strange things start to happen to him, like he'll forget what certain things are, or he starts to like get confused and not understand where he is, in his own house and things like that. And it turns out that he's got a kind of a early stage onset of Alzheimer's. So he's going, he's developed dementia in effect, and he's starting to, forget important aspects of his own life. And it's quite a sad tale, really. It just sort of like watches his progression through until he realizes that he was actually involved with the death of his pet dog, who was his best friend. Um, in terms of shooting it, it was great fun. Again, I mean, we shot a lot of it on a farm, obviously. With it being a farmer, there was some special effects involved whereby he basically like slams his hand on a nail, and the nail goes through his hand. And the guy who did the special effects for it, it was spot on. Really, really very good indeed. Um, and yeah, again, another very talented crew and an enjoyable script. So.
Awesome, awesome. Love it. All right. So now this, we worked on a couple recent projects, but the one that caught my eye was this one that stands out, State of Love and Trust.
Yeah, so State of Love and Trust, that's probably, I would say, the best of the short films that I've done. It was, I mean, the story itself is brilliant, and that's what first sort of captured my attention. I'd seen the advert for it, they'd advertised a casting call for people to get involved, and I'd seen it like a number of times, and I hadn't quite got involved, I'd kind of flicked on. And then it suddenly caught my attention, and I put an application in, and I got the script through, and I read it, and I just fell in love with the script. I just thought it was really, really well written, very poignant, impactful story. So basically, it's about this guy, and he invents. He's in the sort of near future, and he invents a time machine. It's like just a little mini sort of pocket watch style time machine. And he uses it to go back into his own past because his parents were heroin addicts and they died before he was a year old, So they died when he was very young. So he never knew them. And he grew up in a foster home. So he grew up in care, and he grew up never knowing the love of, a proper family. And he decides he wants to go back and he wants to change that fate for him in the past. So he goes back and he meets his parents and he confronts them with what they did, and he helps them to get clean, basically. And it's just a really heartwarming story. And the other actors that I worked with on that as well were brilliant. I mean, there was one guy called Sam who played my dad in the past, and he's just an exceptional actor. And he's got quite a big film coming out soon as well. He's doing really well for himself. So yeah, it was a great experience, and yeah, the end film is wonderful, really very good.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. All right, Chris. So I have this question. So you started on the stage, and then you went to archaeologist. Um, you had kids, the kids grew up, and then you jumped back into screen acting. Out of that journey, what would you say has been some of the obstacles that you had to overcome?
So I would say it's a good question. There's been a few. I would say throughout my life, the one thing that has always challenged me is making time, basically. Like none of us find time, do we? We have to carve it out from other things. We have to make it for ourselves. And it's a struggle. And I think one of the reasons for that is that I've always tried to do, things to the very best of my ability. So I'm not happy with doing, only half a job. I'm not happy with doing something that's substandard, just to get it done. I'd need to put all my time into it and really invest myself in it and get it finished. And the problem with that is obviously it takes a lot of time. So, I'm spending lots of time doing lots of different things, and finding or being able to make time to then go back and do the screen acting as well was tricky. And as I said to you at the start, Devon, I mean, the only reason I could do it, to be honest, was because it suddenly became the case that my boys, can kind of take care of themselves a bit more. You know, they still need me to a certain extent, but I won't see them for hours at a time while they're on their, I don't know, their 3D headset or whatever it is they do. They play Minecraft and Fortnite and all that sort of stuff. Um, and so yeah, I was just lucky really in that sense that I had a bit more time. Um,
Awesome, awesome. All right, Chris. So we're at the part of the episode where I ask this question to all the guests. What is a book? Oh, actually, before I even jump into this question, I forgot to mention. So we have you listed here as an author as well. Could you share a little bit about your book that you wrote?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I write under a pseudonym. So my pseudonym is Benjamin Cross, and I write action thrillers. And the first one is a book called Colony, which is set in the Arctic. Basically, it's about this team of scientists that go up there and they end up getting stranded, and there's something on that island with them, basically, and it all kicks off. You know, I won't say any more about it, but it's yeah, that's the book, and it came out in 2001, I think it was. It was during the pandemic, and yeah, it did much better than I thought. You know, I've sold in excess of sort of 10 plus thousand copies. It's sold the audio rights and various other things as well. And yeah, it went to number one in a various categories on Amazon as well. So it was a bestseller. And yeah, uh, yeah, I've seen it do very well, and it's been a great ride. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. And for the guests that's listening, we'll get that link in the description so you guys can purchase that book and check out this bestseller.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Chris. So now we're at that part where I ask the question to all the guests: what is a book, a TV show, or a film that you recommend to the next generation of actors or even an aspiring author?
Okay. Um, so I think there's quite an easy one here for me, and it's Shawshank Redemption. So basically, the Shawshank Redemption, most people will probably know that it started off as a short story by Stephen King. So he's actually the sort of it's his brainchild. He's the genius behind it. And the reason that I like the story is that it just works so seamlessly well, you know, and it's so complex. If you imagine how many characters there are in that story that are integral to it, you know, it's not just Andy Dufresne, it's not just Red. You know, there are tons of characters in there as well, you know, and it all just ties together. The whole thing works. And realistically, you know, as an author, getting a story to flow that well and getting everything to, you know, one section to move so seamlessly into the other and for all the loose ends to tie up right at the end is a very, very difficult thing to do. And he did it, you know, this is Stephen King. And then it's come to be translated into screen. And it, of course, it's one of the best films, you know, like most widely acclaimed films that's been made effectively in modern times. Exceptionally popular, and yeah, just heartbreaking, affecting, brilliant acting, obviously, throughout. And yeah, I would highly recommend that anybody that hasn't seen that gives it a watch, and indeed reads the short story. I should just add as well, Devin, there's a very similar one for me, which is The Green Mile, which is exactly the same. So another one where Stephen King's written it, it's translated very well from short story to film. So, you know, there's obviously some kind of winning formula there.
So yeah, definitely. That is true. That is a formula. Yeah, all right. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And everyone that's listening, um if you love what you heard today from Chris, the actor, the author, check out his book. We're gonna have it in the description. Also, check out those films, When the Snow Falls, The Shepherd's Tale, and State of Love and Trust. And if you love today's episode, don't forget to check out some of our previous episodes with some of our other fellow actors and authors. And also remember, we're here every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Remember, stay inspired and keep creating. This is our episode of Inside Plug. Devon Jones signing out. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, not at all. Thank you, Devin. Thank you for having me on.